Are these Springboks of ours the greatest of all time? Former British and Irish Lions captain Sam Warburton seems to think so, and when a man of his stature says so, then you have to take it seriously. In this episode, you are going to get a front row seat as I examine those claims and try to come to some kind of logical outcome. So, the GOAT thing is a relatively new argument, probably only really became fashionable in the last decade. And if you're not sure, GOAT simply stands for greatest of all time. So according to Warburton, the current Springboks are the greatest of all time. He said so after the Springboks demolished Wales at the Millennium Stadium, or the Principality Stadium as it is now called, in the November Test matches. Now that's one massive claim, of course. How many great teams have there been in the history of the sport? You'd immediately think of the World Cup winning team, so that would be New Zealand in 1987, Australia 1991, South Africa 1995, the Wallabies in 1999, England 2003, the Springboks in 2007, the All Blacks in 2011, the Kiwis again in 2015, the Bokke in 2019, and then again in 2023. You'd certainly have to consider Grand Slam winning teams as well. England have won 13 Grand Slams, Wales have won 12, and France have won 10. For me, for a Northern Hemisphere team to be considered the greatest of all time, they would also have to have won a series in South Africa and or New Zealand. History shows that our two countries are the most difficult places to win. Even with their combined might of England, Ireland, Wales, and Scotland, the British and Irish Lions have seldom had success in South Africa and New Zealand. France have won series in both countries, but they've never won a World Cup, so it's difficult to find a space for them on this list. Likewise, Ireland have won in New Zealand, but they lack a World Cup. The English team of 2003 would have to be right up there. In 2003, they defeated the All Blacks in New Zealand. They beat the Wallabies in Australia twice, who, don't forget, at that stage were the reigning world champions. They had also beaten both those teams at Twickenham the year before and had secured the Grand Slam before winning that year's World Cup. A truly unstoppable force in 2003, and it had been coming because they had been very, very good in 2002, 2001, and even in 2000 they came to South Africa, and even though they didn't win the series, they did draw the series against the Springboks. Now, the Welsh team of 1971 could be a contender. Wales won the Five Nations, as it was still known in those days, completing a Grand Slam in the process, and then they made up a good dose of the British and Irish Lions squad that went to New Zealand and beat the All Blacks. But as much as that was a great Welsh team, they were not the ones who actually beat the Kiwis. So it's difficult to actually see them in GOAT terms. Now, Australia had a great team from 1984 to 86. They went to the UK and completed a Grand Slam. They handed out a few hidings in 85 and 86 before winning a series in New Zealand. The 1999-2000 Wallabies were also pretty special, winning the World Cup and then back-to-back Tri-Nations. They were also able to defeat the All Blacks and Springboks on their own turf. Interestingly, no one really seems to talk about that Australian team when we discuss the best of all time. But if you look at what they did and their victories, you cannot discount them. That Australian side was one of the very few that actually came to South Africa and beat the Springboks. Even though it was a last-minute penalty, it doesn't matter. They were still able to beat us. Now, let's come to New Zealand, because there are a few All Blacks teams that we could throw into the mix here. So many great All Blacks teams over the years. They've won multiple Grand Slams. They've beaten the Springboks in South Africa. They've won the World Cup, and of course, too many rugby championships to count. Now, many seem to be in agreement that their 2011 to 2015 team was the best of the bunch. It's hard to argue. They won back-to-back World Cups. The Rugby Championship was won 3 times. And if you like, you can say that just before that, they won a Grand Slam in 2010. And they pretty much steamrolled everyone in their way in those years. And it actually extended into 2016 and 2017 too. We're talking about a team with a 75% plus winning record in the history of the sport. At that stage, it was beyond 80%. No one else has done that. And as much as it pains me to say it, I think if we're honest with ourselves, we'd have to concede that they are the greatest team in the history of rugby overall. That doesn't necessarily mean that they've had the greatest team of all time in a certain era and that you can pluck that out and say that that is the very best. But I do think that overall they are the greatest nation in rugby, in the same way that Brazil is the greatest nation in football, even though they haven't won the World Cup for more than 20 years, and the sport has largely been dominated by European teams in the 21st century. And I mention that because I've got a very interesting analogy that I want to share with you. But just before I do that, South Africa are obviously right up there as well. What I just said about the All Blacks doesn't mean that these Springboks of ours are not the greatest team of all time, as per Sam Warburton, a former British and Irish Lions captain, no less. So do you understand the distinction that I'm making? So this South African team is the greatest side of all time, but overall, New Zealand is the greatest rugby nation in the history of the sport. I always like to say that in rugby, New Zealand are what Brazil is in football, and what Germany or Italy are to football, South Africa is to rugby. Well, let's talk about our world champions then. From nowhere at the start of 2018 to world champions at the end of 2019. That was a truly remarkable turnaround by Dr. Rassie Erasmus. Then COVID interrupted the team in 2020. That made it really hard to build momentum, but also depth in 2021 and 2022. Nevertheless, Jock Ninamo managed to do just that. Now, maybe we didn't always get the best results in those years, but you can also understand why. Nevertheless, we then went on and won the World Cup in 2023, and you might say it was the most difficult manner in which to win the Webb Ellis Cup. We had the most difficult pool, then we had to face the host nation in the quarterfinals, followed by a very tough England side in the semi-finals, and then the All Blacks in the final. Who has ever overcome that kind of a challenge? And then last year was really good too, beating everybody we faced, and our 2 defeats came as a result of last-minute kicks. Not to mention all the experimenting Doc did, using 51 players in 2024. All in all, you can see why Sam Warburton says this is the greatest team of all time. Yes, we might not blow teams out of the water like the All Blacks teams did, but we don't play that kind of style anyway. For context, when the score is 28-0 after 20 minutes, you know New Zealand is in total control. By the same token, South Africa could be leading 6-0 after 20 minutes, and if you're paying attention, you'll note that the Springboks are in complete control. Like John Smith once said, we are like the African rock python. We slowly squeeze the life out of you. You feel the life slowly leaving your body, and then suddenly you die. I don't believe any team has overcome the adversity that ours has. Throw in the socio-economic situation our country faces, and the knowledge that these players are playing for the nation, and indeed for every South African, and from an opponent's point of view, how do you even begin to compete with that? Right, so what do you think? Who do you rate as the greatest team of all time? Let me know in the comment section down below. Maybe you think it's a different team, one that I haven't mentioned here. And while you're busy with that, you may as well hit the super thanks button. That's the heart with a $sign inside of it. You'll see it down there. It allows you to make a highlighted comment on my channel. And if you do make a highlighted comment, I would be very grateful for that. I will also click the heart button and I promise to reply. And it will give you the opportunity to make a small donation to my channel. The reason I'm looking for donations is because 1, I would love to do this full time, and 2, I want to go to Australia in 2027 and cover the Rugby World Cup for you with daily content from down under. So I'm going to need a little bit of funding. They don't do it in rands, they do it in dollars, so it starts from as little as $1. I know the rand is not what it once was, but you know what? Like I said in my previous episode, if you happen to be a Rupert or a Motsepe and you enjoyed this, hey, you know what? You can give me $100 million. I will not complain. Nevertheless, if you're not ready to do that, you can still support me by attacking the like button down there. You can click on it, but you can also spear tackle it. Why not? You can also subscribe to this channel if you haven't already done so. Now, in my last episode, I described the new competition that is coming, the Rugby Nations Championship. It's going to be sponsored by Qatar Airways, and the Springboks will have an opportunity to add another trophy to the cabinet. I went into great detail explaining how it will work and the controversies as well as the pros and cons about the competition. You can watch that video. It's appearing on your screen over here. And in this video, we discussed who the greatest team of all time is. In a previous video, I discussed whether or not these current Springboks are the greatest Boks of all time. And you can watch that one over here. And I look forward to your company next time.